The Luminos Arts Fund Gala was the kind of night where wealth didn't just speak, it screamed. Held in a glittering Manhattan hotel, the grand ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers, their light dancing across black marble floors and silk-draped tables. Outside, New York's skyline sparkled, a constellation of ambition and power. Inside, the air buzzed with the clink of champagne glasses and the low hum of self-important whispers. Billionaires in tailored tuxedos, reality stars in gowns heavy with diamonds, and art collectors with sharp eyes mingled, their laughter as polished as the silverware. They were here to bid on masterpieces, to donate to the arts in a way that screamed status more than charity. The centerpiece of the night was Shades of Solitude, an enigmatic painting of emerald greens and molten golds. Its strokes so alive they seemed pulse. Rumors swirled that it could fetch over $28 million, maybe even break auction records. Nora Hale slipped into the ballroom unnoticed, her presence as quiet as a shadow. At 27, she carried herself with a stillness that didn't demand attention but held it if you looked twice. Her ivory silk dress, unbranded and softly draped, stood out in its simplicity against the sea of couture. Her black hair was loosely tied, a few strands framing her face, and she wore no makeup, no jewelry. Her brown eyes, deep and steady, betrayed a story she hadn't yet told. In her hand was a plain invitation card. Her name, Nora Hale, printed in modest font. She was a freelance painter from Harlem, scraping by on commissions for cafe murals and community center walls. No one here knew her name, and no one cared to. She moved through the crowd, her steps soft, drawn to shades of solitude like a moth to flame. The painting hung under a soft spotlight, its colors swirling with a quiet intensity that seemed to speak only to her. Nora stood before it, her gaze tracing every brushstroke, her lips parting slightly as if greeting an old friend. She didn't notice the sidelong glances from the elite, their eyes flicking over her plain dress with disdain. A security guard nearby muttered into his earpiece, his brow furrowing as he watched her linger. To him, she looked out of place, like someone who'd wandered into the wrong world. The crowd's whispers grew louder, names like Basquiat, Hockney, and Klimt floating through the air. They spoke of art not as beauty but as investment, their voices dripping with the confidence of those who owned everything. A photographer, circling the room for a gossip column, snapped a shot of Nora and leaned toward his colleague. "Who's that? Looks like she got lost on her way to a thrift store," he said, his voice low but sharp. A few guests nearby overheard, their lips curling into smirks. One woman, draped in sapphires, tilted her head and murmured, "Probably a server who snuck in." The word stung, but Nora didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed on the painting, her fingers brushing the edge of her invitation card. Across the room, a young journalist live-streaming the gala on X panned his phone toward Nora, his voice dripping with amusement. "Looks like someone didn't get the dress code," he said to his thousands of viewers, zooming in on her simple gown. Comments flooded the stream. "Who let her in? She's got to be crashing." The digital chatter spread, a quiet prelude to the storm that would soon engulf her. But Nora didn't hear it. She stood there, lost in the painting's depths, her heart beating in rhythm with its colors. To her, the opulence of the gala was just noise, a distraction from the truth she saw in those emerald and gold strokes. As the evening unfolded, the crowd's attention shifted to the auction stage, where the night's bidding would soon begin. Guests took their seats, their faces alight with anticipation, ready to claim a piece of history. Nora lingered by the painting a moment longer, her expression unreadable. A man in a velvet suit brushed past her, muttering, "You're in the way." Without a second glance, she stepped back, her movements calm, but her fingers tightened briefly on her invitation. The guard watching her spoke into his earpiece again, his eyes narrowing. To him, she was an anomaly, a glitch in the polished perfection of the night. The gala was a fortress of wealth, a place where power and prestige reigned supreme. But Nora Hale, in her unassuming dress and quiet grace, was a spark in the darkness. They didn't see it yet, the fire she carried, the secret she held. They would soon enough. The Luminos Arts Fund Gala hummed with anticipation as guests settled into their seats, their eyes gleaming with the thrill of the upcoming auction. The ballroom's golden light cast long shadows, and the air crackled with the kind of energy that only money and power could ignite. Nora Hale stood at the edge of the crowd, her ivory silk dress a stark contrast to the glittering gowns and tailored suits around her. She clutched her plain invitation card, her brown eyes scanning the room, but her heart was still tethered to shades of solitude. The painting hung like a beacon, its emerald and gold swirls calling to her even from across the sashes, tattered and stained. She didn't belong here, not in their world, but she wasn't here for them. The first whispers of trouble came from Marcus Lang, a tech mogul whose fortune was matched only by his arrogance. At 48, he carried himself like a king, his sharp jaw and piercing blue eyes commanding attention. As he strolled past Nora, his gaze landed on her simple dress, and a smirk curled his lips. "Excuse me, miss," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to turn. "This isn't a community art fair. Did you take a wrong turn at the subway?" His voice was smooth, but the mockery cut deep. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd, heads swiveling to gawk at Nora. She met his gaze, her expression calm, but her fingers tightened on her invitation. She said nothing, her silence a shield against his venom. The laughter drew more eyes, and soon Serena Blake joined the fray. At 33, Serena was an Instagram influencer with a legion of 12 million followers, her every move a calculated performance. Her sequined gown shimmered like liquid silver, and her auburn hair cascaded in perfect waves. She was posing for a selfie in front of shades of solitude, her phone angled to capture the painting's glow. Nora, standing nearby, inadvertently stepped into her frame. Serena spun around, her green eyes flashing. "Hey you," she snapped, her voice carrying across the room. "You're ruining my shot. Move, unless you think that thrift store dress deserves to be in it." Her entourage, 3 women in equally dazzling gowns, giggled, their phones already out, recording the moment. Nora stepped back, her movements graceful, but a flicker of pain crossed her face, gone as quickly as it came. The crowd's amusement grew, feeding off Serena's cruelty. Elliot Vance, a 40-year-old art critic with a reputation for cutting reviews, leaned toward his assistant, his voice loud enough to carry. "She's probably some amateur painter, dreaming of touching real art," he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Look at her. She's out of her depth." His words sparked more chuckles, and a woman nearby, dripping in emeralds, added, "Maybe she's here to sketch it for her Etsy shop." The room buzzed with derision, each jab a dart aimed at Nora's quiet dignity. Nora's heart pounded, but she kept her composure, her eyes fixed on the painting. A memory flashed through her mind, sharp and vivid. She was 19, standing in a small Harlem gallery, her portfolio of sketches trembling in her hands. Serena, then an assistant to the gallery director, had flipped through her work with a sneer. "You'll never make it in this world," she'd said, her voice cold. "Stick to decorating coffee shops." That rejection had crushed Nora, forcing her to rebuild her dreams from the ashes. Now, standing in this glittering ballroom, she felt that old wound reopen, but she refused to let it break her. The auction began, and the energy in the room shifted. The first lot, a Hockney sketch, sold for $10 million. A Basquiat followed, fetching $18 million. Then Shades of Solitude was announced, and the air tightened with greed. The auctioneer, a silver-haired man named Julian Hart, called out the opening bid, $15 million. Hands shot up, Marcus's, Serena's, a Saudi heiress in a ruby-red gown. The bids climbed fast, $18 million, $22 million, $25 million. Nora watched in silence, her face serene, but her pulse raced. She knew every stroke of that painting, every sleepless night it had cost her. Then, in a moment that seemed to still the room, Nora raised her bidding paddle. The plain card, with her name in modest font, gleamed under the chandeliers. For a split second, there was silence. Then the room erupted in laughter. Serena spun around, her phone still in hand, and called out, "Oh, please, the coffee shop girl thinks she can play with the big leagues." Her voice dripped with honeyed scorn, and her entourage cackled. Marcus leaned back in his chair, grinning. "That's adorable," he shouted. "What's next, bidding with pocket change?" Elliot Vance scribbled in his notebook, muttering, "She's making a fool of herself." The mockery swelled, a cruel tide washing over Nora. A massive screen at the front of the ballroom, meant to display the auction items, suddenly flickered. Serena's Instagram video appeared, zoomed in on Nora's face, her simple dress, her steady hand holding the paddle. The caption read, "Poor girl dreams in millions, but her bank says zero, Gala flop." The crowd roared with laughter, phones flashing as guests recorded the moment. #GalaFlop trended on X within minutes, memes of Nora's dress flooding the internet. One showed her face photoshopped onto a thrift store mannequin, captioned, "When you crash a gala but forget your wallet." A gala staffer in a crisp black vest approached Nora, his voice loud enough for nearby rows to hear. "Miss, this area is for VIP bidders only," he said, smirking. "You're not on the list. Please move to the lobby." Guests snickered, their eyes glinting with amusement. Another staffer chimed in, "She's probably here for the free appetizers." The taunts echoed, painting Nora as an intruder, a nobody daring to step into their world. She stood her ground, paddle still raised, her dignity unshaken but her knuckles white from gripping the card. The laughter didn't stop. Serena whipped out her phone again, this time live streaming to her millions of followers. "Look at this, nobody," she said, panning to Nora. "She thinks she's a player. Stick to your paintbrushes, sweetheart." Comments flooded in. "Delusional, kick her out." "Who does she think she is?" Across the room, Marcus leaned toward his date, a model in a sapphire gown, and scoffed. "Bet she's never seen a million, let alone bid it." Elliot Vance tweeted from his seat. "Unknown in rag, dress crashes luminous gala, thinks she's a bidder, gala flop." The digital storm raged, shredding Nora's pride before the world. Nora's paddle stayed up, steady, her brown eyes locked on Julian Hart. The crowd's venom surged, a mob tearing at her resolve. A woman in a diamond tiara hissed, "She's insulting the art with that bid." Another guest yelled, "Get her out," gesturing to security. Nora's chest tightened, the weight of their cruelty pressing down, but she didn't waver. She remembered the cold nights in her Harlem apartment, painting with borrowed supplies while her brother slept on a cot nearby. She remembered Serena's voice, 8 years ago, telling her she'd never be enough. That memory burned, but it also fueled her. She wasn't here to bow to their laughter. She was here for something bigger. The bids for Shades of Solitude climbed higher, hitting 30 million. Marcus raised his paddle again, his smirk unwavering. Serena fanned herself with her bidding card, her eyes flicking to Nora with mocking pity. Elliot scribbled furiously, already drafting a scathing review of the pathetic display he was witnessing. The screen overhead looped Serena's video, the #GalaFlop, now a global sensation. Nora stood alone, a solitary figure against the painting's glow, her paddle gleaming like a quiet rebellion. They thought they knew her. They thought they could break her. They were wrong. The Luminos Arts Fund Gala was a battlefield of egos, the ballroom pulsing with the frenetic energy of wealth and ambition. The auction for Shades of Solitude had reached a fever pitch, the painting's emerald and gold swirls commanding the room like a silent monarch. Bids flew fast, each one a declaration of power. 30 million, called a Saudi heiress, her ruby gown flashing under the chandeliers. 31, countered Marcus Lang, his voice booming with the confidence of a man who'd never lost. Serena Blake raised her paddle with a flourish, her silver gown catching the light as she smirked. 32. The crowd buzzed, their eyes darting between the elite, their phones capturing every moment for the world to see. Nora Hale stood at the edge of the chaos, her ivory silk dress a quiet rebellion against the room's opulence. Her bidding paddle, plain and unassuming, remained raised, a steady beacon in the storm of laughter that had mocked her moments before. Her brown eyes were fixed on the auctioneer, Julian Hart, whose silver hair gleamed under the spotlight. The crowd's taunts still echoed in her ears, Serena's venomous live stream, Marcus's cutting jabs, Elliot Vance's smug tweets, but Nora's face betrayed nothing. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with purpose. She'd carried this moment inside her for years, and it was finally here. Julian Hart's gavel hovered, his voice steady as he called, 32 million, going once? The room held its breath, waiting for another bid to shatter the silence, but before he could continue, a sharp beep sounded in his earpiece. His hand froze mid-air, his brow furrowing as he listened to the message. The crowd stirred, sensing a shift. Julian's face paled, his eyes darting to his tablet. He cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said. "I've just received an urgent request from the artist of Shades of Solitude. They wish to withdraw the painting from the auction permanently." Gasps ricocheted off the marble walls. Marcus's paddle dropped to his lap, his smirk vanishing. Serena's fan snapped shut, her green eyes narrowing. The Saudi heiress clutched her pearls, her ruby gown suddenly garish in the stunned silence. Whispers erupted. "Who's the artist? Why now?" As heads turned, searching for answers. The massive screen overhead, still looping Serena's mocking video, flickered and went dark. A single spotlight clicked on, bathing Nora in a soft, golden glow. She stood motionless, her simple dress shimmering like moonlight, her brown eyes fierce yet calm. Every eye in the room locked onto her. Nora took a slow, deliberate step forward, her heels clicking on the stone floor. The sound echoed like a heartbeat, commanding the silence. She walked to the center of the stage, her presence filling the vast ballroom without a single word. Julian stepped aside, his tablet clutched tightly, as if he too felt the weight of what was coming. Nora reached the podium, her hands steady as she set her bidding paddle down. When she spoke, her voice was clear, not loud, but it cut through the air like a blade. "My name is Nora Hale," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "I painted Shades of Solitude." The room froze. Glasses clinked as hands trembled. Serena's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. Marcus's jaw tightened, his blue eyes wide with disbelief. Elliot Vance's pen stopped mid-scribble, his notebook forgotten. The crowd's laughter, so vicious moments ago, choked in their throats. Nora stood taller, her gaze unflinching. "I painted it in a crumbling Harlem apartment," she continued, her voice steady but laced with raw emotion, with leftover paint and scraps of canvas. "While my brother slept on a cot nearby, sick and hungry, I poured my heart into it, every stroke a piece of me. You just bid $32 million on it, but I'm buying it back for $1. Murmurs broke out, a wave of shock rippling through the elite. Nora reached into her dress pocket and pulled out the certificate of authenticity, its edges crisp and official. She held it up, letting the crowd see the truth in her hands. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she tore it in half. The sound was a gunshot in the silence, sharp and final. Gasps followed, louder this time, as pieces of the certificate fluttered to the stage. But Nora wasn't done. Her voice grew sharper, her eyes locking onto Serena Blake, who sat frozen in her silver gown. "There's something else you should know," Nora said, her words like a storm gathering strength. 8 years ago, Serena Blake was an assistant at a Harlem gallery. I was 19, begging for a chance to show my work. She didn't just reject me. She stole one of my sketches and sold it to a fashion brand for millions. She called me a failure, said I'd never belong in her world. Tonight, I'm here to take back what's mine. The crowd erupted in whispers, heads whipping toward Serena, her face drained of color, her lips parting in a silent gasp. Nora reached into her pocket again, this time pulling out a faded piece of paper, a sketch, its lines unmistakably similar to Shades of Solitude. She held it up, her hand steady, revealing her signature scrawled at the bottom, dated 8 years ago. The crowd leaned forward, some standing to see as the truth hit like a thunderbolt. Serena's theft, her betrayal, was laid bare. A woman in the back whispered, "That's the same design from that fashion campaign." Another hissed, "She stole it?" Nora's gaze never left Serena. "You built your empire on my work," she said, her voice low but searing. "But you can't steal my soul." She turned to the crowd, her eyes blazing. "I refuse to sell my art to people who only value it for their bank accounts. My 42 paintings will be displayed for free, forever, at the Harlem Community Center where I grew up. Art isn't a status symbol, it's a heartbeat." She stepped back from the podium, the torn certificate lying at her feet like a fallen crown. The spotlight followed her, illuminating her simple dress, her unadorned beauty. She walked past Shades of Solitude, pausing to touch its frame, her fingers lingering as if saying goodbye. The crowd was a graveyard of egos. Marcus stared at the floor, his hands clenched. Serena's entourage shrank away, their phones now silent. Elliot scrambled to delete his tweet, his fingers shaking. A single guest, a young artist in a modest suit, began to clap, slow and deliberate. Another joined, then another, until a quiet applause rose, a fragile acknowledgement of Nora's truth. Nora didn't look back. She walked toward the ballroom's glass doors, her steps light but resolute. The weight of their laughter, their cruelty, fell away with every step. She had reclaimed her voice, her art, her worth. And she wasn't finished yet. The Luminos Arts Fund Gala ended in a stunned hush, but the world outside its glittering walls was anything but quiet. By dawn, Nora Hale's name was a wildfire, spreading across headlines, social media, and whispered conversations. The woman in the simple ivory dress, mocked as a nobody, had turned the tables on Manhattan's elite, and the aftermath was seismic. The ballroom's golden glow faded, but Nora's spotlight burned brighter than ever, illuminating truths the powerful couldn't outrun. The internet exploded with her story. The New York Times ran a front-page feature, Nora Hale, the unknown artist who shamed the art world's elite. Art Forum declared her the voice of a new era. The image of Nora standing on the gala stage, her torn certificate at her feet, went viral, shared millions of times on X. Posts read, "She didn't just win, she rewrote the rules." Hashtag Galaflop, once a weapon against her, morphed into Nora Rising, a rallying cry for artists and dreamers everywhere. A grainy video from the gala, capturing the moment Nora revealed Serena Blake's theft, racked up tens of millions of views. Commenters raged. "Serena's done! Nora owned them all!" Nora's past came to light, each detail a brushstroke in her legend. She'd grown up in Harlem's shadows, painting on scavenged cardboard as a child, teaching herself from library books while caring for her sick younger brother. Her talent had been a secret, shared only through anonymous submissions arranged by a mentor who died 2 years earlier. Her paintings, sold in the shadows, hung in private vaults and prestigious museums, their true creator unknown. Until now, Shades of Solitude was hailed as a masterpiece, its value soaring into the hundreds of millions, but Nora's refusal to sell made it priceless. Museums like the Metropolitan and MoMA begged to display her work, offering blank checks. Nora didn't answer. She had other plans. While Nora's star rose, her tormentors fell hard. Serena Blake's empire of influence crumbled overnight. The video of her mocking Nora, paired with proof of her theft, a stolen sketch, turned into a fashion brand's logo, was damning. By morning, her Instagram had bled 8 million followers, her posts drowned in comments calling her thief and fraud. Luxury brands dropped her contracts, citing reputational damage. She tried a tearful live stream apology, her makeup streaked, her voice shaking. "I made a mistake," she said, but the public wasn't buying it. A viral X post summed it up. Serena built her fame on stolen art. Nora Rising. Her latest gala appearance flopped, her name blacklisted from elite events. She was a cautionary tale, her silver gown now a symbol of her disgrace. Marcus Lang's downfall was just as swift. His tech empire, built on ruthless deals and a polished image, couldn't withstand the backlash. A clip of him sneering at Nora, calling her a subway stray, was looped endlessly online, spawning memes with tech bully. Clients pulled out, citing his classless behavior, and his company's stock plummeted, shaving billions from its value. At a San Francisco conference days later, attendees turned away as he passed, whispering, "That's the guy who mocked Nora Hale." He tried to salvage his reputation by offering to fund an art charity, but the gesture was mocked as desperate. His art collection, once a point of pride, was quietly sold off, its value tainted by his shame. Elliot Vance, the art critic who dismissed Nora as an amateur, faced his own reckoning. His tweet, "Unknown in rag dress crashes Luminos Gala," was screenshotted and ridiculed, his credibility shredded. Readers unearthed his past reviews, calling them elitist and out of touch. Major galleries dropped him as a consultant, and his latest column was ignored, buried under comments like, "You missed the real story, Elliot." His name, once synonymous with authority, became a punchline in the art world he'd ruled. The Harlem Community Center where Nora grew up became a global destination. Days after the gala, it opened a free gallery. Shades of Solitude hung at its heart, unframed, its colors raw and alive. Thousands flocked to see it, from school children to scholars, leaving notes pinned to the walls. "Thank you, Nora. You showed them." The gallery wasn't just a space, it was a movement. Proof that art belonged to everyone, not just the rich. Donors, inspired by Nora's stand, poured in funds to expand it, but Nora stayed out of the spotlight. She was in the center's art room, teaching kids to paint, her hands smudged with color, her smile quiet but full. Marcus Lang tried to visit the gallery, a checkbook in hand, hoping to buy his way back into grace. Security turned him away, acting on Nora's orders. Serena sent a letter, begging for a private meeting to make amends. It went unanswered. Their wealth, their influence meant nothing now. They stood outside Nora's world, peering through glass at what they could never touch. Nora's paintings, once hidden in the shadows, were now treasures. Art historians dissected their layers: grief, hope, defiance, woven into every stroke. A canvas in a Tokyo billionaire's vault, another in a Paris museum. All bore her signature, their value unmoored by her refusal to sell. The world called her a genius, a rebel, a saint. She called herself nothing, just Nora, brush in hand, painting for those who saw what she saw. The Harlem Community Center buzzed with life, its walls alive with color and possibility. At its heart hung shades of solitude, unframed, its emerald and gold swirls glowing under soft light. The painting wasn't just art. It was a promise, a beacon for anyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. Crowds poured in daily, from wide-eyed kids clutching sketch pads to gray-hailed scholars with tears in their eyes. They left notes pinned around the canvas. "You gave us hope, Nora. This is what art should be." The gallery wasn't a monument to wealth, but a home for dreams. Its doors open to all, just as Nora had vowed. Nora Hale, now 27, moved through the center like she'd never left. Her jeans were smudged with paint, her black hair tied back, her brown eyes warm with quiet joy. She taught art classes to children, guiding their small hands as they dipped brushes into color. One boy, no older than 10, handed her a drawing, a clumsy but heartfelt copy of Shades of Solitude. Nora knelt beside him, her smile soft, and hugged him tightly. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. That moment, captured by a volunteer's camera, landed on the cover of Time magazine, the headline bold, "Nora Hale, the artist who redefined worth." The world beyond Harlem kept chasing her. A tech billionaire offered $1 billion for one of her paintings, his jet idling for a meeting. Nora sent a polite no. Her 42 works stayed off the market, shared only with the community center's kids, their laughter louder than any auction gavel. Months later, an old canvas of hers, sold anonymously a decade ago, surfaced at a Paris auction. It fetched $700 million. The buyer, a mystery, maybe a royal, maybe a recluse. Nora didn't care. She was in her Harlem studio painting with the kids, sunlight streaming through cracked windows. When a journalist asked why she'd torn the certificate that night at the gala, Nora paused, her brush hovering over a canvas. "It wasn't mine to keep," she said, her voice soft but sure. "It belonged to the people who feel it, who see themselves in it." Her eyes flickered with peace, not anger. The world called her a legend, but she was just Nora, her hands stained with paint, her heart full. Marcus Lang, Serena Blake, and Elliot Vance faded into obscurity, their names whispered only as warnings. Nora's light outshone them all, her art a mirror for anyone who dared to dream. She walked past Shades of Solitude every day, her steps light, her soul unbroken. She'd turned their laughter into silence, their wealth into dust, and built a world where art was free.